السلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبو القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I want to thank the Al-Jaafaria Youth Committee or Society for inviting me. It's an honor to be here amongst you in this conference. So I was asked to talk about the contract, right? The marriage contract and different cultural aspects or cultural things within it. Now, most of you know I wasn't born into Islam, so I'm a convert to Islam, and I wasn't aware of any of the different cultural nuances that exist within all the different Eastern cultures. But the first time that I realized that culture plays such a part in marriage was the first time I went on tabligh. And I remember before my first speech that I gave, a group of people from, this was in the UK, a group of people came and pulled me aside and talked to me for a few minutes. And one of them gave me a story, right? So these were Pakistani Sayyids, right? And in this culture, a Sayyid is not allowed to marry a non-Sayyid. So of course in Islam, Sayyids could marry non-Sayyids, but in the Pakistani culture, they prohibit it, or at least in this part of the Pakistani culture. And this person came to me, and they're like, look, I remember in my village in Pakistan, some Sheikh came on the mimbar and said that it's okay for a Sayyid girl to marry a non-Sayyid man. And then some of the people in the masjid got up and they wanted to tear him down from the mimbar and go give him a beating in the alley or something. I told him, no, he's young, he hasn't studied yet, he doesn't know anything. Right? And they were trying to threaten me not to say such a thing. Right? Make sure you don't say that. And these are people who, they even criticize Imam Khomeini because Imam Khomeini's daughter married a non-Sayyid. And they attack Imam Khomeini because of this issue. No other issues, only this one. Now, when I want to speak about this, I know there's not many Pakistanis here, there's a few. But what I want to speak about more is the ceremony that we have when we get married. So when we're signing this contract, there's usually a ceremony that accompanies it. And I wanted to talk about this ceremony a bit. Now, before I do that, though, I'm going to speak about the meher, the dowry, because one of the brothers asked me to 5 minutes ago, so just very briefly. So I remember when I wanted to get married, so, I wasn't lucky enough to marry the first person I asked. I was rejected a few times. So the first person that I wanted to try to get married with, we spoke, we talked. It looked like it was going well until her dad said, that's fine, I accept you to get married to my daughter with the condition that the meher, the dowry, is 2 houses, one in Lebanon and one in Iran, because I was studying in Lebanon at the time. I said, okay, thank you, I'll see you guys never again. Yep, I'm leaving. And, since then I've heard many, stories of huge dowries. In Iran, they have a custom, some people, where they'll have the dowry, the number of gold coins of the year they were born. So the year in Iran, for instance, 1,300 and whatever, that many gold coins is their dowry. Right? I've seen in the States people with the dowry of upwards over $100,000. Right? And I've seen many people not able to get married because of this. Now, Islam, we all know Islam encourages small dowries. We all know that, I'll give you guys a little homework. Go read and see what the dowry of Imam Ali alayhi salam was when he married Sayyidah Fatima Zahra salam alayha. I won't give you the answers to everything. Go back and read that. It's easy to find. Just search it online, you'll find it. Right? And this is how Islam encourages us. But why is it that people want high dowries? Why do fathers demand such high dowries? And for the life of me, I could only think of 2 reasons. If I'm wrong, maybe in the question and answer you could inform me. But one of them is they're trying to sell their girl. They're trying to sell their daughter. They want their daughter to receive a lot of money, so then somehow it benefits them. Or two, they're trying to scare the potential husband into not divorcing their daughter. Because if they divorce their daughter, they got to give so much money. So they'll stay with them. Even if the marriage is the worst marriage in the world, even if there's so much abuse and everything going on, they'll feel that they're financially forced to stay in the marriage, and that somehow is positive. Right? So we should definitely discourage high dowries because there's no reason for them, and Islam encourages the opposite. Now, what I wanted to talk about, though, was the ceremony. Now, with this ceremony, that when the people are signing the contract, when they're getting married, many different things happen, and many different cultures do different things. Right? So I can't go and I can't pick out from each culture something. So what I wanted to do is just briefly mention what Islam encourages us to do, and then only one aspect of something that normally happens that's haram, or at least, sometimes happens that's haram. So what Islam encourages in these gatherings, when we're getting married, one is to feed believers and the poor. Right? So it's good to invite mu'min, people who are strong believers, to take part in this ceremony. This is positive. It's also good to invite poor people and feed them. Right? So a lot of times we don't do that, but these are things that we're encouraged. Second thing is to announce it, to let the community know that you've gotten married, right? Not to get married in secret. Third is to remember the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam, in the ceremony. So I remember one of the first weddings I attended after I became Muslim was in Lebanon, and the person who was getting married, he had one of his friends recite poetry about the Ahlul Bayt, and it was probably the best wedding apart from my own that I've ever attended. It was really beautiful. Now, one thing that we must do, though, is stay away from haram. We shouldn't start our lives, our married life, with a haram gathering. Right? It's something we should think about, as Sheikh Ali Mehdi was saying. We should realize what we're doing. We should think about the future. Right? And in this aspect I'm talking about is, think about, you're starting your life with haram. That's terrible. Now, some people say, which this statement really upsets me, they say it's okay, it's only one day. Only one day. One day I'll sin, and the rest of my life I'll be religious. Right? It shows such a bad understanding of Islam and of their relationship with Allah, where one day I'll sin. No, you never sin. You never cause other people to sin. When you make a haram gathering, not only are you sinning, but the sins of everyone else in that gathering are also counted on you as well. And now, one thing that happens is dancing. So I wanted to mention a little bit about dancing. Now, there's a question posed to many of the ulama, and I'm only going to talk about the rulings from two of the marajah, two of the most influential marja in the world, Sayyid Khamenei and Sayyid Sistani. And I'll mention their rulings. If you want the rulings of anyone else, I'm sure you could ask, and there'll be people who could give you their rulings. But with regards to dancing, there's two cases. There's men dancing and there's women dancing, and who they're dancing in front of. So according to Sayyid Khamenei and Sayyid Sistani, per obligatory precaution, a man is not allowed to dance in front of women or other men. Right? So men don't dance. Right? Now, for women, according to Sayyid Khamenei, women are allowed to dance in front of other women and their mahrams with certain conditions, which we'll mention. But according to Sayyid Sistani, again, per obligatory precaution, even women aren't allowed to dance in front of other women. Right? So for Sayyid Sistani, no dancing at all. Right? Now, I'll read for you one of the fatwas just so you could see what those conditions are. So Sayyid Khamenei says, women dancing in front of women should be avoided per obligatory precaution if, right? So what's the if? If it is considered debauchery or lahwi. And it's prohibited if it incites lustful feelings. So if somehow the dancing is inciting lustful feelings, that's when you refrain. If it's corrupt if it's accompanied with sin. So if you're playing haram music and dancing, that's haram. You don't do that, right? And you might say, well, hijabis wouldn't listen to haram music, but unfortunately it happens and they dance. I remember in Qom one time, I told the story to some of the brothers. One time I was in Qom and I had just finished class. I was in the haram of Sayyidah Ma'asuma, salamu alayha, and I was leaving her haram, walking down the street, feeling, spiritual because I just left the haram. And all of a sudden, I hear someone bumping Ice Cube, right? I don't know if you know Ice Cube. So they were bumping Ice Cube. I remember him from when I was a teenager. Then I looked, I was shocked. I'm in Qom, there's Ice Cube, what's going on? Right? I started thinking, where am I? Am I back in LA or something? And I look at the car, and I see they're women. It wasn't men, it was women wearing chador, like covering their faces like this, bumping Ice Cube. I said, wow, that's crazy. Right? So if the dancing's mixed with haram, music, can't do that. Or if a non-mahram man is present. And then, of course, there's no difference if it's in a wedding or not. Now, there are exceptions, though. Right? So traditional dance is considered an exception to some of the maraja. Right? So an example of a traditional dance would be dabki or something like that for the Lebanese people. They have a special dance that men do sometimes. And apparently, that wouldn't be haram considering various conditions. So Sayyid Khamenei asked about traditional dancing. He says if it doesn't entail sexual excitation or committing a haram act, for instance, haram music, or it doesn't result in a bad consequence, it's permissible. Right? So the traditional dancing is an exception. Another exception is a wife dancing for her husband. Right? So remember, the man can't dance for her wife, but the wife could dance for the husband. So this is more for kind of getting into what Sheikh Nami will be talking about maybe. And what's it called? With this, because Sheikh Nami is really excited about talking to you about what happens after you get married. So, so one of the things is, it's actually permissible for a wife to dance in front of her husband, of course, when there's no other haram going on. So Sayyid Sistani was asked if a wife could dance in front of her husband. He says it's allowed as long as dancing is not accompanied with haram music. Sayyid Khamenei says if a woman dancing for her husband is not accompanied with prohibited actions, again like haram music, then there's no problem in it. Now, I think my time is running. So last thing what I wanted to do, which also leading into Sheikh Nami's speech, and I was asked about this to speak about this too, is about intimacy after one recites the marriage contract. So after the kitab, or what you say, what's it called? After that and before the wedding. So while the woman is still living in her parents' house and before she moves in with her husband. Is it allowed, is it permissible for this couple to be intimate with each other? And it's interesting, I've actually been asked this question. So a brother came to me after he's done the marriage contract. He came to me, he asked, he said, look, my wife's father prohibits, or he says that we are not allowed to be intimate with each other. Does she have to listen to her father, or is she allowed to be intimate with me? Now, one major point that we have to mention is in Islam, there's no such thing as an engagement period. Right? After you write this contract, you're husband and wife. And all the things that are halal for a husband and wife become halal for you. Right? There's no, like in what's it called, in Western culture, when they put the engagement ring on, but they're not actually married, there's none of that in Islam. That doesn't exist. It's either you're married or you're not married. If you're not married, you're non-mahram, all of the things that are prohibited are prohibited, and then when you're married, all the things that are halal are halal. There's no middle ground. There's no middle relationship. It's either one or the other, right? So there's no condition that could be put on permanent marriage, for instance, that when you get married, you can't be intimate until you move in with your husband. Right? So intimacy is allowed. And there would even be times where it become wajib. There's definitely times where it's encouraged, right? And there's nothing that after a father gives his permission for you to marry his daughter, there's nothing that prevents intimacy after that. Okay, and if there's, I know that the speech was kind of choppy. There's so many topics to touch upon when we're talking about the contract. So if you guys have questions on anything I said, or if there are aspects which I didn't talk about, feel free in the question and answer session to ask the questions, and inshallah we'll discuss them. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.